The flight back from Denver touched down just after midnight. I stepped into the arrivals hall with a suitcase in one hand, and an uneasy feeling lodged deep in my chest. The work conference had gone fine. Better than fine, honestly. I'd nailed the keynote presentation, finally landed the investor I'd been courting for 6 months, and even made peace with flying solo, while my husband Darren claimed he was too slammed with renovations to join me. But something about the way he'd rushed me out the door 4 days ago kept clawing at me. The house was quiet when I pulled into the driveway. Our porch light was off, which was odd. Darren always left it on for me. Always. I hauled my suitcase up the stone steps and tried my key in the front door, and it didn't fit. At first I thought I must be sleep-deprived. I jiggled it, pushed, turned, pulled, nothing. My key no longer worked. Confused, and now a little alarmed, I knocked. The porch light flickered on. Through the peephole, I saw a face. A woman. She opened the door halfway, blonde, younger than me, and wearing one of Darren's old college sweatshirts. "Can I help you?" she asked. "This is my house," I said slowly. "Who are you?" She blinked. "No, it isn't." The words didn't compute. "Excuse me?" "Look, I don't want trouble," she said. "You should leave before I call the cops." The door slammed. It took me 2 full minutes to move. I fumbled for my phone, called Darren. Straight to voicemail. I called again. Nothing. I texted, "Who is that in our house? Why doesn't my key work?" No response. I ended up in my car, curled around my suitcase in the back seat, parked 2 blocks away. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. Something was wrong, deeply wrong. I just didn't know what yet. Morning came like a slap. I walked to the bakery 2 blocks down, ordered a coffee I didn't touch, and waited for the legal aid office to open. I didn't tell them everything, not yet, just asked what might cause a key not to work when I'd been out of town for less than a week. "Could be a change in ownership," the assistant said casually. "Of the house?" I asked. She nodded. "If your name's not on the deed, someone else can transfer ownership." My stomach flipped. I called the county records office. And that's when the second punch landed. They confirmed the title had changed hands. 2 days ago. The new deed listed only Darren's name. I hung up, then stared at the phone. And stared some more. I called a real estate lawyer. "Do you have proof you were co-owner?" he asked. "Yes. We bought the house together. My name was on the original title." Then he forged something. My knees buckled. I sat on the curb, stunned. "Do you have access to the original documents?" "Yes, at least." I did. They were in our home safe. He sighed. "First step is getting copies from the registry. Second, we need to file a title fraud claim. But if he sold it, things get messy." "Sold it?" "It's possible. Or he could have transferred ownership into a trust, or another name. Either way, it's criminal, if done without your knowledge." A woman walked past me on the sidewalk, looking down at her dog, oblivious. The sun was out. Cars drove by. Life went on, but mine felt like it had slammed into a wall. I dialed Darren one more time. He finally answered. "Hey," he said, casual as ever. "What did you do?" I hissed. "Who is that woman in our house? Why doesn't my key work?" He was quiet for a beat. Then, in a voice laced with arrogance, he said, "You weren't here. You abandoned the house. I just made things official." "Abandoned? I went to a work conference. For 5 days." "Yeah, well, things change." He hung up. That was the moment something in me snapped. Darren had always been passive-aggressive, always pulling little control games, moving my stuff without asking, signing checks for things we were supposed to decide on together. But this was nuclear. I walked into the records office 30 minutes later with purpose. I demanded every single paper tied to our property history. And then, while flipping through one of the newer records, my heart stopped. There it was. A signature. My signature. But I hadn't signed anything in the past year. It was forged. Badly. The loops were wrong. The slant was too steep. I stared at it, feeling my hands begin to shake. I was shaking because something else became clear. He hadn't just taken my name off the deed. He had transferred the property to a private holding company. And the listed manager of the company was not Darren. Not directly. It was someone else. Someone I knew. Someone who didn't know I was back yet. And the worst part? That someone had my maiden name. The title holder wasn't just another alias of Darren's. It was someone new entirely. I stood there, gripping the papers, and whispered aloud, "Why would my sister do this to me?" Quote, "Before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you, please subscribe. Tomorrow I have a special story for you." The coffee I drank that morning turned to ash on my tongue. I stood at the edge of the sidewalk with a manila folder clutched in both hands, the name on that transfer document burning into my memory like a brand. Leona V. Hargrove. My sister. My younger sister. My estranged younger sister, who hadn't spoken to me in 3 years. Not since the fight. Not since she'd accused me of being a, quote, controlling ice queen, and moved across the state to start over. We hadn't even texted since. And now she owned my house. The real estate attorney confirmed it an hour later. Legally, the transfer appears airtight until we prove the signature was forged. But your sister's name as the manager of the holding company, that complicates the narrative. Complicates? She was never involved in any of this. He gave me a look like he'd seen this 100 times. Miss Hargrove, you're facing something we call a layered title scheme. It makes it harder to prove fraud because of how many hands the property passed through. First to your husband. Then from your husband to a holding company. Then from that company to a second LLC. Each move looks legal, on paper. I leaned forward, my jaw tight. How did she get involved? She may not have known. Or she may be more involved than you think. My head throbbed. How long does this take to fix? If we can prove fraud, any forged signature or falsified intent, we can initiate a reversal, but it will take weeks, maybe months. I don't have months. He tapped the folder. Then I suggest you get evidence. Find out who knew what, when, and how your sister got her name on that deed. The lawyer gave me a business card with a referral to a forensic handwriting analyst. I left his office, burning with adrenaline. The betrayal was twisting into something else now. Something hotter, more focused. If Darren thought I would walk away, he didn't know who he was dealing with. And if Leona was involved, then she had made a fatal mistake. That night, I drove to my friend Whitney's place. Absolutely not sleeping in your car again, she said, throwing open the door. Get in here. She made me tea, threw a blanket over my shoulders, and listened as I told her everything. When I finally stopped, her eyes were wide. Leona, are you sure? I handed her the paperwork. Jesus, she whispered, why would she do this? That's what I need to find out. Whitney crossed her arms. Well, she was always obsessed with Darren. I blinked. What? You never noticed? Back when we all lived in the city, she used to flirt with him, always touched his arm when she laughed. I sat back, stunned. I hadn't seen it, not clearly, not until now. 2 days later, I drove out to Leona's last known address, a small renovated loft over a flower shop in Riverton. The bell over the door chimed as I stepped in. The shopkeeper smiled, then froze. You're Naomi, aren't you? I stiffened. Do I know you? Only through your sister. She said you might come by. I narrowed my eyes. She said that? When? Just yesterday. She picked up an arrangement and said she was expecting company. My pulse thudded. Is she upstairs? The woman shook her head. She moved out last week. Where to? She hesitated, then leaned closer. I probably shouldn't say this, but she mentioned a new place in Old Marina, said something about finally getting what she deserved. Old Marina was the neighborhood Darren and I had spent 2 years remodeling a house in. A house I had picked out, designed, loved. And now my sister was living there? I drove straight there. The front gate was new, modern. Security camera installed. I parked half a block away and waited. Then I saw her. Leona. in yoga pants and a cashmere sweater, walking out with a smoothie in hand, tossing her long, honey blonde hair like a shampoo commercial. She had the nerve to look happy. I waited until she turned the corner, then crept closer. Through the window, I saw a photo on the wall. It was the frame Darren and I bought on our anniversary trip to Vancouver, and it was a new picture of Leona and Darren, arms around each other, kissing. I stumbled back. My breath caught in my chest like a punch to the ribs. It wasn't just betrayal. It was collusion. They were together. They planned to strike this. I stumbled back to the car, shaking, hand clamped over my mouth. And just as I started the ignition, my phone buzzed. An unknown number. I answered. Naomi, Leona's voice purred, syrupy and cruel. Next time you stalk my house, at least wave to the camera. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My hand clenched around the phone, the plastic groaning under the strain. What the hell did you do, Leona? She laughed softly, like this was all a joke to her. You really don't get it yet, do you? You always thought you were smarter than everyone. You thought Darren would stay loyal to your rules, your coldness, your boring, perfect routines. You stole my house. Our house now, she corrected. Besides, it was never really yours. You didn't see how miserable he was, Naomi. How he needed someone who actually cared about him. Someone who supported his plans. Plans? He's a fraud. He's been manipulating me for years. Then maybe you should have paid more attention. Instead of leaving him alone while you ran off to pitch your little startup. My voice dropped low. This isn't over. No, she said, smug and venomous. It's just beginning. The line went dead. I sat in my car for another 10 minutes, fury bubbling under my skin, until I could think straight. The betrayal wasn't just a legal maneuver. It was psychological warfare. Darren had always liked control. I had seen it in little things, the way he adjusted the thermostat after I set it, the way he rewrote my grocery lists. But I had mistaken his need for dominance as harmless quirks. And Leona? She had been waiting, lurking in the wings for the moment my life cracked open. She didn't just move in, she moved on top of my identity. That night, back at Whitney's, I printed out every financial statement, every bank transaction, every document from the past year. We laid them across her dining table in rows. There, Whitney pointed, tapping a highlighted transaction from 3 months ago. This withdrawal. It's from your joint account, but the account number changed right after. I zoomed in. $27,000. Labeled, Contractor Retainer. That's not your signature, Whitney said. It wasn't. The slant was too sharp, and my last name was spelled wrong, an extra loop in the G. I'd know it anywhere. That money came from the home equity line, I whispered, which means they took out debt against your house before they transferred the deed. Whitney looked up slowly. So, this wasn't spontaneous. It was a strategy. The next morning, I went to the handwriting analyst. She examined the forged signature under a microscope, made high-res scans, and compared it with my notarized documents from years past. Absolutely forged, she said within 10 minutes, and sloppily too. Whoever did this used a trace overlay and didn't match the pen pressure. See here? Stroke hesitation. She gave me a certification document to submit in court. I felt a tiny flicker of victory. Not enough to feel relief, but enough to fuel me. Then I called Darren's former contractor, the one who remodeled our kitchen. Naomi? He said. Wow, haven't heard from you since the backsplash job. How's the house? I inhaled. That's what I'm calling about. I heard you did another project recently, with Darren and someone named Leona. Oh yeah, new master suite, big budget, paid in full upfront too. Did you ever see a deed transfer or authorization from me? He paused. No, Darren said you were on board. Even said you signed the permits. I didn't. He cursed softly. Do you need me to make a statement? Yes. A signed affidavit. And any copies of those permits. The web was unraveling, thread by thread. But as I built my case, something else haunted me. Why now? Why had Leona and Darren launched their betrayal in the exact window I left town for the conference? It was too precise, too convenient. Then it hit me. The email. 2 weeks before I flew to Denver, I'd received an anonymous tip. A small contract project in Colorado. Just a panel talk. The kind of thing I usually wouldn't bother with. But someone had insisted, said my name came highly recommended. The sender was anonymous, the tone flattering. I dug through my inbox. There it was. From speakerbookings@dev-summit.pro. Mailto. speakerbookings@dev-summit.pro. No contact name, no reply email. I clicked on the message header. The IP address was masked. I copied the header and sent it to a friend who worked in cybersecurity. 20 minutes later, she called. Naomi, the original IP traces back to a residential router in Old Marina. My throat went dry. Whose? It's not registered to a person, but the billing address on the IP account? She read it slowly. It was my house. The message had been sent from inside my home, before I even left for the conference. They hadn't just taken advantage of my absence. They engineered it, Snapes. I returned to my lawyer the next morning, armed with documents, statements, and a timeline. He skimmed the evidence. His brows rose higher with each page. This is enough to file a formal fraud claim, he said. We can serve Darren and Leona both within the week. Good. He looked at me. But be prepared. When people like this get backed into a corner, they don't go quietly. I smiled grimly. Neither do I. But before I left, he handed me an envelope. This came in for you. Hand-delivered. No return address. I opened it. Inside was a single photograph of my bedroom, taken last night, with a handwritten note on the back. Times asterisk. Stay out of it, or you'll lose more than your house. Asterisk. My hands trembled as I held the photo. The angle was from inside the room, not through a window, not from a camera peeking through blinds. Whoever took it had stood between my walls, on my carpet, over my life. They were my house, I said aloud. Whitney was already dialing the police when I rushed into her kitchen. They came quickly, took the envelope, the photo, the note. A young officer named Felix listened carefully, his face grim. No fingerprints, he said, after swabbing. Gloves. Whoever did this knew what they were doing. I nodded slowly. Can you get footage from the Old Marina security cams? He hesitated. It depends. If the system's private, we need a warrant. I met his eyes. Then get one. I can prove the house belongs to me, and I have a fraud case in motion. 3 days later, I was back in my lawyer's office. Court filings were moving. Darren and Leona had been served. According to the process server, Leona laughed in his face and offered him coffee. Darren shut the door without a word. Good news, my attorney said. They missed the deadline to respond to our preservation letter. That means any attempt to sell or remortgage the house now qualifies as willful concealment. Will that help us move faster? It gives the judge leverage. And the forged signature combined with the new threat, that photo? We've got a solid case for an emergency injunction. He paused, eyes narrowing. But we need to get ahead of them. People like this don't wait to be cornered. They make moves. He wasn't wrong. The next day, my bank called. Ms. Hargrove? We received a request to liquidate a joint investment account. I nearly dropped the phone. I never authorized that. We flagged it for fraud. But the request came with a document bearing your signature. Another forged document. Another escalation. They weren't just satisfied with stealing the house. They were draining everything. That evening, I finally confronted my parents. We hadn't spoken in nearly a year, ever since they told me I was too harsh on Leona, that I always made things worse. They opened the door to their colonial home with surprise. My mother wore an apron dusted with flour. My father held a glass of scotch. Naomi, my mother said, you look tired. I walked in without waiting, sat down at the kitchen table, opened the folder, slid the photo across to them. Your other daughter broke into my home, with my husband. They forged my name on legal documents, transferred my house, my money, everything. And this, I held up the photo from my bedroom, was on my pillow, Silence. Then my father cleared his throat. We don't know anything about this. You defended her for years. You told me I should be the bigger person. That she didn't mean it. What about now? Still want to lecture me on family unity? My mother sat slowly. Leona was always fragile. She made mistakes. But I'm sure this isn't what you think. I stood. No, it's exactly what I think. And if she shows up here, don't offer her tea. Call the police. That night, I stayed at a hotel. It was small, quiet, safe. Until 3:12 a.m. when the fire alarm blared. I stumbled into the hallway barefoot, heart pounding. Staff ushered us outside. Smoke curled into the night air, not from the hotel, but from the dumpster next to it. It had been set on fire. Deliberate, the fire marshal said. Accelerants used. My car, parked 2 spaces away, was untouched. But the message was clear. They knew where I was. And they were escalating. It's time to go public, Whitney said the next morning. I hesitated. You mean online? She nodded. You have proof, documents, the forged signatures, the photo, the timeline, post it, all of it. That could backfire, or it could protect you. If something happens to you, the world will know who to look at. I thought about it all day. At 8:03 p.m., I posted a thread. I never thought I'd say this, I wrote, but my sister and husband stole my house, forged my name, transferred the deed while I was on a fake work trip they orchestrated, then left a threat in my bedroom. I included images, documents, dates. Within 12 hours, it had over 40,000 shares. Journalists reached out. Victims of similar schemes shared their stories. One woman messaged, "They did the same thing to me. Not your sister, but the same LLC name. Be careful." That caught my attention. I forwarded it to my lawyer. He called within minutes. Naomi, this is bigger than Darren and Leona. That LLC? It's been used in at least 4 fraud cases. Different names, different cities, but the same pattern. Quote, "You mean they're part of something?" Yes, and if we can link them to a larger scheme, we might be able to trigger a federal investigation. The ground shifted under my feet. This wasn't just about my home anymore. It was about exposure, about burning the rot out by daylight. But just when things began to tip in my favor, a notice appeared in my inbox. From a private collections agency. Final warning, $92,000 lien placed against your former property. They had taken out a second mortgage. Under my name. 2 weeks after removing me from the deed. The loan was active. And legally, I was still responsible. I stared at the screen, numb. And then a text arrived. From Darren. No words. Just a video. I opened it. It was Whitney, tied to a chair. Crying. And behind her, Leona, smiling. "You wanted attention, Naomi?" she said sweetly. "Now you've got it." I dropped the phone. Literally. It hit the hotel floor with a dull thud, screen still lit with the frozen image of Whitney's face, wet with tears. My breath caught. The edges of my vision narrowed. They had her. They had Whitney. Not just threats now. Not just forged documents, stolen deeds, whispered warnings under breath or left on pillows. No. Now they had taken a person. A human being. My best friend. The first thing I did was dial 911. I told the operator everything I could. Names, context, the threat video, addresses, case numbers. By the time I finished, my voice was hoarse. "We're dispatching a detective to your location," the operator said. "Please remain where you are and keep the video safe." "It's already backed up," I said, and uploaded to the cloud. Detective Henley arrived less than 40 minutes later. Older, steel-gray hair, eyes that didn't blink unless they needed to. She listened without interruption as I re-explained everything. When I handed over the phone with the video, she didn't flinch. She watched it twice, then turned it off and looked at me flatly. "You said this woman in the video is Leona Hargrove?" "Yes, my sister." And you believe she's working with your estranged husband, Darren? What's his full name? Darren Mark Cullen. She scribbled it into her notebook. And your friend Whitney? When did you last see her? Yesterday morning. She left for a shift at the bookstore around 10, texted me around noon. Then she was supposed to meet me for dinner. Never showed. You file a missing person? I was about to. Then that came in. She nodded and stood. We need to move fast. Whitney's apartment was empty. Her phone was on the kitchen counter. Her purse still hung on the chair. Only her keys were gone. But the real discovery came when they checked the building's back alley. Scrapes on the asphalt. A scuff mark on the brick wall. A smear of what might have been blood, though they wouldn't say until forensics came back. They canvassed for witnesses. One elderly tenant thought they saw a dark blue SUV around the time she left. Nothing more. No plate, no make. I was shaking as I walked outside. Leona had escalated this into something criminally undeniable. And she had done it because I refused to back down. Back at the precinct, Henley and a team reviewed all the evidence I had. I gave them everything. The signatures, the deed documents, the forensic handwriting analysis, the emails from the fake conference offer, the message from the other woman who had experienced a similar scam, the investment account fraud, the mortgage, the lien. This isn't just fraud, Henley muttered. This is racketeering, possibly even human trafficking, if they've done this before. She didn't finish the sentence. What can I do? I asked. Stay visible, she said. Don't disappear, make noise. And most importantly, don't go near them. If they have your friend, they're desperate. Desperate people do irrational things. I posted again that night. Not just for attention. For safety. My name is Naomi Hargrove, I wrote. And if anything happens to me, my family, or my best friend Whitney, the people responsible are Leona V. Hargrove and Darren Mark Cullen. I included the video. Blurry, silent, but clear enough to show Whitney, the bindings, Leona's face, the mocking smile. The thread exploded. Within 2 hours, my inbox was flooded. Offers of help, offers of legal advice, anonymous messages with tip-offs. Asterisk, they were seen in Bridgewater last week. Leona was driving a Lexus Gray late model. Asterisk, Darren has a property out near Lake Eden. Check the outbuildings. Used to be an old retreat cabin. I sent everything to Henley. She responded with a single word, on it. It was just after 3 a.m. when she called me back. We found her. My stomach flipped. Whitney? Alive! I sank to the floor, tears hitting my cheeks before I could stop them. She was in a shed behind a lakeside property in Eden County. Same one Darren bought under an alias 6 months ago. She's dehydrated, bruised, but she's safe. EMS is with her now. And them? Gone. By the time we breached the structure, it was empty. They knew we were coming. A pause. But we found something else. A burner phone, several SIM cards, and a laptop with partial client lists. We're running it now. I visited Whitney in the hospital later that day. Her eyes were puffy and her skin was bruised, but she still managed a grin. Told you, she croaked. You were right not to back down. I'm so sorry, I whispered, wrapping her hand in mine. This happened because of me. No, she said firmly. This happened because they underestimated you. Henley updated me the next morning. The laptop files indicate this wasn't a one-off. They've done this to at least 5 other victims. They targeted women with assets, poor family connections, and predictable routines. They used shell companies, forged signatures, lured them away with job offers or emergencies, then stripped them clean. And Darren and Leona were the core? Appears so, but we need a full team to dig deeper. She hesitated. There's one more thing. She held out a piece of paper, an address. This is where Leona bought a plane ticket to, the day before we found Whitney. I read it. It was a village in southern Spain. Interpol has been notified. If she lands, they'll know. And Darren? Henley sighed. Still off-grid. But we found traffic camera footage of his car heading north, possibly into Canada. That afternoon, I got a call from my lawyer. Naomi, he said, breathless. The judge just granted the emergency injunction. Your name is reinstated on the property. All financial movements are frozen. And your identity theft case has triggered a federal fraud investigation. We got it? We got it. My knees buckled. I sat down slowly, eyes stinging. Then my phone pinged. A new email. From an encrypted address. Subject line. You think this is over? Attachment. A video still. A warehouse. A table. And someone else. Someone chutir fnores nosum. Bound. This story took us a long time. If you like it, subscribe! Now, back to the story. The still frame from the video sat on my screen like a wound. It showed a concrete warehouse, dimly lit. There was a folding table, a lone metal chair, and a woman tied to it, head slumped, no identifying marks, no clear background, just that. Just enough to ruin the thin peace I had built since Whitney was found. I forwarded the email to Detective Henley immediately. She called 10 minutes later. We're sending it through digital forensics. Don't respond to the email. And, Naomi, be careful. Whoever this is, they're escalating again. I was still on edge when a new message came in. This one wasn't from an anonymous source. It was from Leona. Subject, nice try. Message, you should have taken the hint. Now someone else gets to suffer. Still want your house back, sis? Still want to play hero? My hands balled into fists. I didn't reply. I sent it straight to the task force now handling the federal end of things. They had names, partial aliases, trails of burner accounts. But so far, no full net had landed. Leona was still out there. And so was Darren. And someone else had been pulled into their chaos. I went back to Whitney the next day. She was stronger. The bruises were healing. Her voice had its usual bite again. You can't let them win, she said. You can't. They sent another threat, another video. Someone else is being held. Her face paled. Do you know them? I couldn't see. She pressed her lips into a line. They're trying to stretch you thin, wear you down. Same strategy Darren always used. I nodded slowly. I know, but this time, I'm not the one breaking. I am. Detective Henley confirmed what I suspected later that week. The woman in the video, her name was Stephanie Royce, 31, tech consultant. She'd filed a fraud complaint 3 months earlier against a holding company registered under the same umbrella LLC Darren used to steal my house. And she'd gone missing a week ago. We believe she followed a tip to a fake job interview, Henley told me. Same pattern, same bait, same playbook. Stephanie had been chasing her case alone. Until she vanished. The FBI wanted me off the investigation. You're too close, the agent said over the phone. You're a target, Naomi. You need to let us handle it. Then handle it. Because they keep taunting me. They're still 2 steps ahead. We have a digital team tracing the video source. It was uploaded through a proxy chain, but we're making progress. Progress. Meanwhile, someone was tied to a chair in a concrete box. I couldn't wait. So I turned to someone I never thought I'd call again. Mason. He'd been my friend back in university, smart, paranoid, wildly gifted with anything that plugged into a wall. You said if I ever needed something off the books, I started. Naomi Hargrove. As I live and breathe, what the hell did you get into? I need to track a location. From a video, no metadata, possibly uploaded via darknet proxies. He laughed like it was Christmas. Send it. Mason called 2 hours later. Your sister's an idiot. Tell me something new. No, really. She left an echo trail. Didn't strip the temp files clean. I triangulated where the video was uploaded from. Where? He named a rural warehouse in the outskirts of Denton, less than 90 miles away. I sent the address to Henley. We're mobilizing, she texted. Do not go there yourself. I stared at the message, then packed a bag. Mason met me in a dark gray SUV he borrowed from his brother, bulletproofed. This is stupid, he said, but also kind of fun. It's not fun, I replied. It's necessary. We arrived at the Denton perimeter around dusk. The warehouse looked half abandoned from the outside, a cracked lot. Weeds waist high, one flickering security light. Mason pulled up a drone view. 3 heat signatures, he said, 1 pacing, 1 stationary, 1 lying down. My blood chilled. Stephanie. We call Henley now. Already did, Mason said. They're 20 minutes out. We don't have 20 minutes. I crept toward the side entrance. Mason stayed back, monitoring. I had a taser, pepper spray, a hammer. Nothing else. The door creaked as I slid it open. The pacing figure turned. It was Leona, wearing black, holding a phone. Naomi, she said, smiling like I'd come to a family dinner. I was hoping you'd come. She gestured behind her. Stephanie was there, pale, gagged, eyes wide. You're sick, I spat. No, I'm just better. Come, Ty. You spent your life being safe, polite. You followed the rules. And what did it get you? A man who cheated. A house stolen. A sister who had to fix everything. I took a step forward. You didn't fix anything. You broke everything. She tilted her head. And yet here you are, in my house. This isn't your house. It's a crime scene. A voice echoed behind us. Hands in the air. Floodlights burst through the back wall. FBI. Guns drawn. Tactical vests. Leona froze. Mason stepped in behind me. Stephanie whimpered. Then Leona hurrying. I chased her. She burst through a back exit, scaled a fence. But as she landed, she twisted her ankle. I caught her wrist, yanked her down. This ends now, I said. She screamed. But it was over. Agents swarmed. She was cuffed, thrown in the back of a van. And as she passed me, she hissed. You think this is done? Darren's not like me. He doesn't forgive. They took Leona into federal custody that night. The charges stacked up within hours. Conspiracy to commit fraud, aggravated identity theft, kidnapping, wire fraud, unlawful surveillance, and obstruction of justice. Henley told me later that if the prosecution succeeded, my sister could be facing a sentence that would outlast her youth by decades. I didn't go home after the arrest. I stayed with Whitney, still bruised, still processing, but alive. We sat in silence for most of that first night, the relief between us fragile, like a truce after a war we didn't know we'd been drafted into. Neither of us spoke Leona's name until morning. Do you think she'll talk? Whitney asked over oatmeal. I shook my head. Only if it helps her. Leona doesn't do loyalty, she does leverage. Whitney's spoon paused. And Darren? That name landed harder. Darren had vanished like vapor. No border crossing. No passport ping. No trace on cards, phones, or known aliases. But his signature was everywhere. In the shell companies, the offshore accounts, the fake LLCs. Henley had confirmed at least 6 identities linked to his fraud trail. Half were tied to other women who had been isolated, taken advantage of, and financially gutted. Some hadn't even reported it. They just disappeared. And now, so had he. A week after Leona's arrest, I was called to testify before a grand jury. My lawyer prepped me for days. I was calm, precise. Angry, yes, but collected. I had the documents, the paper trail, the forged signatures, the testimony of the contractor, the footage from the warehouse. But the video of Leona smiling behind Whitney, that was the piece that held the room still. 12 jurors watched it in silence. One of them closed her eyes. When it ended, the assistant U.S. attorney leaned in. Ms. Hargrove, do you believe your sister and husband planned this together? Yes. From when? Before the conference invite. Before the fake job. Before she moved into my house. They had a timeline. They played a long game. And why do you think they chose you? I looked at them all. Because I was visible, stable, and trusting. They knew I wouldn't suspect family. They knew I'd leave for work without thinking. They counted on my silence. I let that sit in the room, then added, quietly, They were wrong. 2 days later, Leona's plea deal fell apart. She refused to give up Darren. "He'll find me," she told the feds. "He'll know if I say anything." I read that in the update report, stunned. She was terrified of him. Leona, the woman who looked me in the eye and threatened my life, was scared of someone else. Darren wasn't just smarter. He was dangerous. Mason called me later that evening. "I kept digging," he said. "Something about Darren wasn't sitting right." "Go on." "His name isn't Darren Cullen. It never was. That identity was built 6 years ago, pieced together from a dead boy's social and a fabricated birth certificate." My stomach dropped. "Then who is he?" "We still don't know, but he's run the same scam at least 8 times under different names. Naomi, he's been doing this since before you met him." I sank onto the couch. "You didn't fall for him. He picked you. He studied you. He crafted a version of himself to match your blueprint." The call went silent on both ends. Then Mason added, "This guy isn't just a con. He's a ghost. Asterisk." The next morning, I got a call from Henley. He made contact. "Who? Darren?" "A message. To the FBI's tip line. He used a voice modulator, but the metadata lined up with a hotel Wi-Fi ping in Toronto." "What did he say?" Henley took a breath. "He said, 'You're holding the wrong woman. She didn't plan this. I did. Let her go and I'll give you what you want.'" I stood frozen. "He's trying to play the hero now, to manipulate the system. Or," Henley said quietly, "he knows he's losing control." The FBI didn't let Leona go. But they did move her. Witness protection wing. Solitary holding. When I asked why, Henley's answer chilled me. Because someone inside leaked her location. There was no breach. No hacking. Just a human weak point. Darren had people. Or favors owed. Or threats that landed. And now, the net was burning. That night, a car circled Whitney's apartment 3 times. Slow. Deliberate. License plate was fake. Windows tinted. Henley posted a patrol car on the block. I stayed on Whitney's couch with a fire extinguisher by the door. We didn't sleep. Every creak in the building made us flinch. The next morning, another letter arrived at my lawyer's office. No stamp, no return address. Just a single page inside. "Drop the charges, fee and Scheiss. Give up the house. Times, or the next fire won't be in a dumpster." The envelope was cream-colored, the paper thick, expensive, almost elegant. But the words on it were simple, sharp, threatening. "Drop the charges. Give up the house, or the next fire won't be in a dumpster." I stared at the letter in my lawyer's office, the words buzzing behind my eyes. "This is his style," I said quietly. "Polite handwriting. Premium stationery. It's almost civilized." "Which makes it more disturbing," my lawyer said. "He wants you to see it as rational. I've seen this in other coercion cases. It's an illusion of negotiation." Henley arrived minutes later, read the note, and sealed it into an evidence bag. "There's a pattern," she said. "He escalates with each pushback. The question is, how far will he go when he loses total control?" My stomach coiled. "We need to end this. Fast." Henley nodded. "We're bringing in behavioral profilers. Darren may have changed identities, but patterns persist. If we can anticipate his next move, we might catch him before he strikes." But catching a ghost meant becoming a shadow. Back at Whitney's, the tension was suffocating. She tried to pretend things were normal, making pancakes, humming old songs. But I saw the way she triple-checked locks, kept her phone charged, and positioned chairs under doorknobs before bed. We were waiting for an explosion. And it came 3 nights later. Not with a bang, but with silence. 3:48 a.m. I woke up to a cold draft across my face. I blinked, heart pounding, and realized the living room window was open. I hadn't left it open. I reached for the lamp. Nothing. The power was out. I slipped from the couch, moving low, barefoot. Whitney's door creaked. I pushed it open. Empty. "Whitney?" I whispered. Nothing. Then a hand grabbed my wrist from behind. I screamed. "It's me," Whitney gasped, pulling me into the kitchen. "He was here. I saw him." My blood ran cold. "You saw him?" She nodded, pale. "In the hallway, through the peephole, then the lights cut out. I ran to the back door." "Did he get in?" "I don't know." I locked myself in the pantry. We checked the apartment. Nothing was missing. No sign of forced entry. But one thing was different. A matchbook sat on the windowsill. Hotel Provincial, Montreal. I stared at it. Whitney whispered, "Is that a message?" "No," I said. "It's a location." Quote, Henley reviewed the surveillance. One dark shape in the stairwell, hooded, gloves, gone within minutes. No usable footage. But the matchbook was enough. "We already had alerts on hotels in Canada," she said. "Now we know where to narrow the focus." The FBI placed calls. Provincial was flagged. Within 24 hours, a partial match surfaced. A man using the name Garrett Dunn checked in 2 nights ago. Passport listed as American. Photo ID blurred. But the clerk remembered one thing. "He tipped me $100 for silence," the man said. "Said he didn't want to be disturbed." "Room number?" Henley asked. 302. Agents were dispatched. But by the time they got there, the room was empty. Bed untouched. No fingerprints. Except one. On the mirror. A lipstick print. With a name scrawled beneath it in red. Naomi, Key was baiting me. Turning the game around. Taunting. "He's not trying to disappear anymore," Mason said, reviewing the field notes. "He's ton-up performing. He wants you to watch." "Then maybe I should." "Naomi, don't." But I already knew what I had to do. I had to become bait. We set the trap in Toronto. I announced on social media that I'd be giving a public statement about financial recovery and identity protection at a business summit. We made it sound big. National exposure. News vans. The kind of thing someone like Darren wouldn't be able to resist. "If he's following the pattern," Henley said, "he'll try to intercept you, either at the hotel or en route." We rigged the suite with hidden cameras. Agents in plain clothes posed as hotel staff. Mason hacked the elevator cams. I took a deep breath, checked the mirror, and walked out into the corridor with Whitney in tow. Just 2 women on their way to a conference. And then the elevator pinged. A man stepped out. Dressed in gray. Clean cut, calm. And for the first time in over a year, I saw his face. Darren. Older, thinner, but still him. His eyes locked on mine. He smiled. "Naomi," he said softly, "you look better than ever." Whitney froze beside me. I didn't blink. "You're under arrest." He laughed. "You think they can hold me? You think you've won?" From down the hall, 4 agents surged forward. He didn't run. He lifted his hands. "Finally," he said, almost relieved. "I was getting bored." He didn't struggle. That was what unsettled me most. Darren let the agents cuff him as if they were leading him into a massage appointment. Calm, collected, unbothered, like this had been part of his plan all along. Whitney stood back, her hands clenched into fists, trembling. I could feel her pulse from feet away. Henley was already there by the time they loaded him into the armored van. She nodded at me once, then climbed in with him. "He's too slippery to hand off to anyone else," she said. "I want to look him in the eye the entire ride." That night, I slept for 12 hours straight. No alarms. No knocks. No matchbooks. Just sleep. The kind of sleep you don't realize you've been deprived of until it finds you again. Darren's arrest made headlines the next day. Not because he was famous, but because of how many people he had conned. Victims came forward in waves. He had operated under at least 12 different identities across 4 countries. His crimes included financial manipulation, housing fraud, emotional abuse, and even allegations of intimate partner coercion that made my blood boil. He was a monster. But he was also a genius at hiding it. Until now. Until us. Leona, on the other hand, changed overnight. Now that Darren was caught, she stopped fighting. Her attorney arranged a new plea. She turned over files, hard drives, names, dates, a full blueprint of how their scam worked. Times identify stable women with assets. Times find or create a romantic or familial connection. Times create a dependency, emotional, financial, or both. Times encourage separation from friends or work. Times begin signature harvesting. Times establish shell companies. Times divert funds and titles. Times exit with a clean slate. I was number 7 on their list. Whitney had almost been number 8. Stephanie had been number 6. And the horror settled deeper when I learned there had been others who didn't make it out. A woman in Ohio, another in Wales, one in Ontario. Their names were now evidence, but they had vanished in real time. A week after the Toronto summit, I sat down for my first national interview. The network had been careful, respectful. They showed me the questions beforehand. No surprise attacks, just awareness, just truth. What would you say to people who still believe in Darren's innocence? The reporter asked. I looked into the lens. The danger of people like Darren isn't just what they steal. It's how they make you doubt what's real. They weaponize affection. They mirror your dreams. And then, when the hook is set, they gut everything you built. Quote, the silence after that question felt like peace, like closure. But closure, I was learning, isn't clean. Ling. The trial began 4 months later. I was the key witness. So was Whitney. So was Stephanie. So were 4 other women whose names I didn't know before this case, but now felt tethered to like kin. We called ourselves the reclaimers. Not victims. Not survivors. Simers. Because we were taking back what was stolen. Darren showed up every day in a press suit, feigning confusion, disbelief, contrition. But the evidence was overwhelming. Emails, footage, recordings, files. The judge wasn't swayed. This court sees not just a pattern of deception, she said, but a weaponization of trust. This is not merely financial crime, it is psychological warfare. Darren was sentenced to 52 years in federal prison with no chance of parole until he served at least 40. Leona got 17. I sat in the gallery. Didn't cry, didn't smile, just breathed. Outside, reporters swarmed. Microphones, flashes, questions. I raised a hand. Thank you for following this story. But it doesn't end here. There are others like me, who lost homes, money, and trust to predators like Darren. If you're one of them, you're not alone. You can fight back. And you can win. That clip aired on every major network. Emails poured in. So did letters. People who had given up hope. People who were ready to fight. People who saw a piece of themselves in the girl who once came home from a work trip and found her house stolen. I reclaimed my deed. My home. It took months. Paperwork, hearings, verifications. But one warm April afternoon, I stood on my front porch again. Key in hand. Lock turning. Door opening. And the house was Timel mine. Every room echoed a little. Some furniture was gone, some photos broken. Some things couldn't be replaced. But some could. I painted the front door blue, planted peonies in the garden, and built new picture frames. One of them held a photo of the reclaimers. We took it the day of the verdict. Arms linked. Smiling. Free. After the trial, silence became its own kind of music. For the first time in over a year, I could wake up without checking locks, without refreshing news feeds, without wondering if another envelope would slide beneath a door in the middle of the night. The house, Lime Mat, Masemp House, was no longer a crime scene. It was a sanctuary. But peace doesn't erase memory. It gives it space to breathe. Whitney moved into the guest house 2 weeks after I reclaimed the property. We didn't speak about the past often, but the air between us had changed. Stronger. Bonded. Not just by trauma, but by defiance. "We should start a foundation," she said one night over wine. "A what?" "To help women who've gone through this. Financial abuse, real estate fraud, digital manipulation. There's a gap." I turned the idea over in my mind. It made sense. It made purpose. We launched it that summer, the Reclaim Project. Our first client was a teacher from Austin whose ex had forged her signature on a lease-to-own home, then skipped town with the title and left her with the debt. The second was a woman in Surrey whose brother emptied her inheritance while she was recovering from surgery. Each case was different. But the pattern was always the same: someone trusted, something forged, a silence too long, then a fight. And we helped them fight. I testified before Congress 6 months later. A subcommittee on cyber-enabled domestic financial abuse invited me to speak. "It starts with love," I told them, "or the illusion of it. And then it becomes paperwork. And by the time you realize what's been taken, it's been laundered through 5 shell companies and sold to a stranger." They listened. And legislation followed. The Hargrove Act passed by winter, a bill mandating stricter notarization protocols on co-owned property transfers and identity verification in digital mortgage filings. My name was in the title. I didn't know how to feel about that. It felt like a gravestone and a trophy in the same breath. One morning, I received a letter. Not anonymous. Not threatening. Official. Parole hearing notification. Dale's Leona Victoria Hargrove, requesting hearing under Section 14B. Sentence reassessment petitioned. My pulse didn't race. Not this time. I called my attorney. "They won't grant it," he said, "but you'll have to submit a statement." I spent the evening writing it out. Not for revenge. Not out of hate. Just truth. To the board. Leona is my sister, my blood. But she used that bond to orchestrate a betrayal that still echoes today. She forged my name. She stole my home. She collaborated in a kidnapping. She played a role in financial destruction across multiple jurisdictions. Her remorse only surfaced when her co-conspirator abandoned her. That's not rehabilitation. That's self-preservation. Nomerj Naken. Nomerj Wenmak. Nomerj Nak. I do not oppose mercy. But I do oppose premature mercy. Nak. Nomerj Nak. Nomerj Nak. Nak. Nomerj Nak. Nak. Nomerj Tekfarj. Nomerj. The board agreed. Parole denied. Another 5 years before the next hearing. When I told Whitney, she nodded slowly. "You okay?" "Yeah," I said, not joyful, not sad, just okay. And that was a good thing. The media faded. The reporters moved on. So did the courts. But the women? They kept coming. The Reclaim Project grew from a desk in my living room to a 3-floor nonprofit with branches in 3 cities. Volunteers, legal partners, financial counselors. We launched a podcast, a book series, an anonymous reporting platform. One night at a speaking event, a woman approached me in tears. "I was number 13 on his list," she whispered. "I didn't even know until I saw your interview. Thank you." We hugged. Not like strangers, but like survivors who had crossed the same river in different storms. Mason eventually moved to the city to head our digital crimes division. He brought coffee every Monday and always wore ironic t-shirts to meetings. Stephanie became a board member. She was quieter, more reserved, but every time a woman reclaimed her stolen assets, she lit up like a lighthouse. We were no longer just a team. We were an army. One autumn morning, I stood outside my house, now surrounded by a freshly painted fence and jasmine growing up the lattice. I watched a woman walk by with a stroller. She paused, smiled at me. "Are you Naomi?" "I am." She held out her hand. "You don't know me, but you saved me. Your story saved me." I didn't have words. I just nodded. And for once, tears didn't sting. They cleansed. Because this wasn't about revenge. It never really was. It was about reclamation. Of homes. Of names. Of names. Of two selves. And I had done it. We had all done it. The house was quiet again. Not with dread, but with peace. The kind of quiet you earn after a war you never asked for, but survived anyway. One afternoon, I found myself sitting in the dining room where it had all started, the same room where I once opened a manila folder and read the words that changed my life, Leona V. Hargrove. Only now, the table held different papers. Grant applications, expansion proposals, budgets for the upcoming Reclaim Project conference in Chicago. Progress, stacked in tidy columns. Whitney walked in with a tray of lemon tea. Want music? I shook my head. No, I want to hear this. The silence. She understood. The air was different now. Not empty, not haunted, just mine again. The conference was a milestone. We expected 100 people. Nearly 600 showed up. Survivors, advocates, legislators, journalists. We held panels on digital coercion, legal loopholes in property fraud, trauma-informed asset recovery. We created toolkits, shared stories, cried, laughed, got angry, got loud. And then, halfway through the weekend, something happened I hadn't expected. An older woman approached me during a break. She wore a deep green scarf and carried a weathered leather notebook. Her hands trembled slightly. Are you Naomi Hargrove? Yes. She didn't introduce herself, just placed a letter into my palm. I think this belongs to you. She turned and walked away before I could respond. I opened the letter. It was dated 3 years ago. Typed. Clean. A confession. From Darren. I read it twice. Naomi? If you're reading this, I probably lost. Which, in its own way, was inevitable. Not because you were smarter, but because you were steadier. Not that Pleona was always erratic. Useful, but messy. You were the constant, the still point, the North Star. That's why I picked you. You didn't deserve what I did. None of them did. But I had to learn whether people were really as predictable as I thought. You were the only one who surprised me. Don't waste time hating me. Hate is an anchor. You've always been good at letting go. Keep going. *D. I stared at the page. My hands felt numb. I brought it to Henley later that week. She examined it, confirmed it matched samples of his writing style and rhythm. They even found a matching print, one of his. Where did this come from? She asked. A woman, at the conference. Who was she? I don't know. We never identified her. The letter was archived into the case record. I never told Whitney. I never needed to. 6 months later, a startup approached us. They wanted to build AI detection tools for financial abuse patterns. I was skeptical. But Mason vetted them. This could flag suspicious document behavior in real time, he said. Forged deeds, fraudulent transfers. It could save people before they fall apart. I said yes. And we partnered. 2 years after the house was stolen, we had tools that could stop it before it even began. On the anniversary of my court verdict, we held a vigil. Not for loss. For return. Hundreds of people gathered with lights and ribbons. We read the names of reclaimers. We lit candles for those still in the fight. And I stood at the front of the steps, holding a photo of myself from 2 years earlier. Tired, stunned, betrayed. This was me, I said. The day I came home and learned that my name had been stolen. I held up a second photo. This is me now. Smiling, strong, whole. And you can become that version too. It takes time, but it takes all this time when we fight together. The crowd stood in silence. Then someone clapped. Then another. Then hundreds. Back at home that night, Whitney handed me a small box. What's this? Open it. Inside was a key. "We are expanding," she said, "but this one stays yours." It was the original house key. The one that hadn't fit the door the night I returned from Denver. The one I had kept in a drawer, too painful to throw away. Only now the lock was changed. And the house was mine again. Truly. Legally. Spiritually. And I didn't need to look over my shoulder. Not anymore. 6 months after the vigil, the Reclaim Project opened its 4th office. This one was in Manchester, our first international branch. Stephanie moved there to oversee it. She called the day before the ribbon cutting. "You know," she said, "you changed more lives than you think." "We all did," I said. "You, Whitney, Mason, all of us." But deep down, I knew what she meant. I'd been the first domino, the one that fell and exposed the rot in the pattern. It wasn't heroism. It was survival, weaponized. Iraq's. That fall, we hosted our 2nd annual Reclaim Summit in Seattle. More than 2,000 attendees. We were no longer the scrappy underground project people whispered about. We were a force. National agencies sent reps. Policy proposals were drafted live. Survivors from every continent shared stories. One moment from the summit etched itself into my memory like stone. A teenage girl stood up during the open forum. "My mom was conned by someone like Darren. We lost our house, we lost everything. But when she saw your video, she stopped blaming herself. She stopped hiding. And now she's here, in this room." The crowd turned as her mother stood. People rose with her. Applause thundered. And I cried. Not because I was sad, but because the story that once tried to break me had turned into a lifeline for someone else. Darren had been in prison for nearly 2 years, but news of his activity still surfaced. His financial trails were still being untangled. Offshore holdings, assets tucked under pseudonyms. Each one found became a restitution fund. The government established the Cullen Recovery Trust. Nearly $3.2 million redirected to victims. I watched one woman, age 72, receive a check that saved her retirement. Another got her farm back. Another paid for her daughter's surgery. That was justice, not the courtroom. Leona had not contacted me since the parole denial. I sometimes wondered if she would try. A letter, a call, even a word through her lawyer. But nothing came, and slowly her presence faded in my mind. Not forgiven, but filed away. Labeled, contained. I stopped dreaming about her face, stopped flinching at her name. And when someone asked, "Do you still think of her as your sister?" I answered honestly, "No, I think of her as a warning." I did return to Denver once, to speak at the same conference I'd been lured away from years ago. The irony wasn't lost on me. I stood in the same ballroom where I had once pitched a product while my house was being stolen. Only now I was teaching people how to recognize the red flags of relational fraud. A full circle moment, they called it. But to me, it was closure by confrontation. I walked the same streets, stayed at the same hotel, and didn't flinch. Whitney met someone. A good someone. She told me one evening, half embarrassed, "I didn't think I could ever trust again. Not after what we went through. But he doesn't want to fix me. He just listens." I smiled. "You deserve that." "So do you," she said. And I paused. Because for the first time in a long time, I believed it. I still had the letter from Darren, tucked in a fireproof safe. Sometimes I thought of burning it. Other times I thought of framing it. But mostly I let it exist as a reminder. What they tried to take wasn't just property. It was my certainty, my credibility, my sense of self. And what I rebuilt wasn't just a house. It was a legacy. Years from now, I want people to remember my name not as a headline or a cautionary tale, but as a turning point, a pivot, A mark on the timeline where we stopped tolerating invisible crimes and called them what they were: real, destructive. Snape's criminal. And when that story is told, I hope someone hears it and decides to stay. To fight. To reclaim. Because I know now. What they tried to bury was a woman who refused to stay quiet. And from that silence, 1,000 voices rose. The 3rd anniversary of the night I lost, everything came and went. But this time, instead of dread, the date brought ceremony. We opened the 5th Reclaim Project office in Boston, a city I once feared because it housed some of the coldest real estate fraud cases on record. Now, we planted a flag there, not as survivors, but as architects of change. I found myself journaling again. It had been a habit before Darren, before the conference, before I knew words like notarization forgery and multi-entity laundering. Now I wrote with intent, not just for healing, for archiving, because someday someone would find these pages. Maybe a girl who just discovered a loan in her name she never signed, or a mother locked out of her house by a son she trusted, or a father blindsided by a partner's betrayal. They would need to know that yes, it happened, and yes, it could be survived, and yes, it could be reversed. With courage, and help, and the right kind of rage. We created the Naomi Fellowship that spring, a fund for legal support of fraud victims with no means to defend themselves. It began with a single case, a single woman. Anna Boucher, 46, immigrant, worked 2 jobs, trusted her boyfriend to manage her finances while she supported her parents abroad. He forged everything. Took her rental property, sold it, left her homeless. We took her case, filed motions, proved the trail, and within 6 months, Anna had her deed restored. She brought tamales to the office every Friday after that. The whole team called her our godmother. Not everything was victories and headlines. Some days were hard. Some clients lost everything before we got to them. Some never wanted help, just someone to listen. Others wanted revenge we couldn't legally offer. I learned to sit in discomfort, to hold silence, to say, what happened to you is real, and it's not your fault. And sometimes, that was the only justice they ever got. I visited Leona once. I hadn't planned to. But a new court development required my statement, and her lawyer requested a supervised in-person meeting. She looked older. Not broken, but no longer sharp-edged. She sat with her hands folded in her lap. No shackles, no dramatics. "Naomi," she said. "Why?" I asked. Her eyes didn't flinch. "Because I wanted a shortcut, and you were always the obstacle." I let that sit. She added, "You were everything I hated, the part of me I couldn't reach, so I tried to destroy it." "And did it work?" Her voice cracked. "No, you only got bigger." We sat in silence after that. When I stood to leave, she whispered, "I see you everywhere now, your name on buildings, on grants, on justice." "It wasn't about justice," I said. "It was about not letting you win." She didn't argue. She just looked down, and I walked out without looking back. 1 year later, her sentence was extended. She tried to bribe a corrections officer. Some patterns never die, but some do. And that's what I had learned. The difference between what can be healed and what must be buried. Whitney got married that June. Simple ceremony. Backyard, linen dresses, no pretense. She asked me to walk her down the aisle. "You were the one who held me together," she said. I cried the whole way down. Later, her husband leaned in and said, "I know what she means to you, and I won't ever make you regret trusting me with her." He never has. Sometimes people ask me what I would say to the woman I was before this all began. The one boarding that plane to Denver. The one who thought a 5-day work trip wouldn't change the world. I would say, "Hold on. They're going to take everything they can, but they won't get all of you. Because when it's over, you'll be more than you were before. You'll be louder, sharper, unignorable. They'll think they destroyed you, but you'll be the one rebuilding others, one by one, brick by brick. Nice, and one day, they'll say your name and not think of the man who took your house. They'll think of the woman who took it all back. A full decade passed before I set foot in the courthouse again. Not as a plaintiff, not as a witness, but as an honoree. The city awarded the Reclaim Project its Civil Justice Innovator Award. The mayor read from a plaque with my name engraved in gold. Whitney squeezed my hand in the audience. Mason recorded it all on his phone, tears silently streaking his usually snarky face. And as I stepped up to the podium, I saw a gallery packed with people whose names I'd once only known through case files. Now they were colleagues, volunteers, advocates, and leaders in their own right. 10 years ago, I began, someone took my name off a deed. Today, I hold the titles to 5 offices, 3 community centers, and a growing coalition of survivor-led advocacy networks. Because what they tried to erase wasn't just my signature, it was my story. Applause thundered. But I didn't hear it. I only saw the faces, all of them nodding. Alive. And finally heard. The Reclaim Project expanded to 9 countries. We launched a digital evidence vault to timestamp suspected forgeries. Partnered with 3 major banks to trial proactive fraud alerts based on our data. And created a scholarship for women re-entering school after identity-based financial abuse. We called it the Hargrove Promise. I got letters every month. Not from Leona. Not from Darren. From women. From daughters. From people who said, your fight made room for mine. That's all I ever wanted. Not vengeance. Just space. My house remained my anchor. I kept the blue door. Replanted the peonies every spring. Hung new art. Cooked in the kitchen I once feared I'd never see again. It wasn't just a home. It was a monument. To what can be lost. And what can be rebuilt. There were hard moments even after the storm passed. Not all wounds heal into clean lines. Some days I still hesitated before signing papers. Still double-checked locks. Still flinched at the word trust. But I'd learned that healing wasn't a destination. It was a practice. A discipline. A promise you keep to yourself, even when no one's watching. Especially then. Stephanie met a partner too. Brilliant, kind, gentle with her silences. Mason published a book about digital vulnerability. He signed my copy, To the Bravest Firewall I've Ever Known. Whitney and her husband bought the house next door to mine. We built a gate between our gardens. And on the first day of spring each year, we host a neighborhood brunch. Because that's what survivors do. They reclaim. Not just houses, but joy, tradition, and the right to feel safe. One day, a new staff member brought in an old newspaper clipping. Look what I found in the archives, she said, the headline that started it all. It read, Woman returns from work trip to find house stolen and takes back her life. I laughed. It wasn't entirely accurate. But it wasn't wrong. I pinned it on the office wall, right under a framed replica of the original forged deed, signed with my name. Wrongly. Falsely. But now, part of the history I own. The morning of the 15th anniversary, I sat on my porch with a cup of chamomile and an old, dog-eared journal in my lap. The pages had faded. The ink had smudged in places. But the words were still there. Raw. Wounded. Honest. They told the story of a woman who came home from a business trip and found her life rewritten without consent. But what they didn't say, and what only time could prove, was that the story didn't end there. Not even close. We hosted the biggest Reclaim Project gala to date that year. Over 1,000 guests. Survivors, lawmakers, donors, volunteers, and the families we'd helped hold together when everything seemed to fall apart. I gave a speech, but it wasn't about me. It was about resilience. "We're not here because someone hurt us," I said into the mic. "We're here because they torty didn't stop us." Asterisk. Applause filled the ballroom. And I stepped down from the stage into a crowd of people who now knew what it meant to reclaim not just their property, but their voices. That night, back at home, I took out the final copy of the forged deed. I had kept it all these years, not out of spite, but as proof. That erasure is not the end. I shredded it. Slowly. Deliberately. Strip by strip. And fed it into the compost, where it would nourish something new. Later that week, Whitney came over with a letter in hand. No return address. No stamp. "It was on my doorstep this morning," she said quietly. Inside was a single photo of a beach, dated 2 months ago. On the back, "Still watching, still wrong, still wrong." Our eyes met. Darren. Even in the belly of the system, he was finding ways to whisper. But I didn't flinch. "Let him watch," I said. "The world isn't his stage anymore." We submitted the photo to federal custody. They added it to the file. Security updated, doors checked, protocols reviewed. But fear didn't return. Only caution. Only clarity. Only the knowledge that vigilance was not weakness. It was survival, refined. In year 16, we passed a landmark bill, the Digital Consent and Asset Security Act. Nationwide protections. Mandatory multi-verification processes. AI-driven fraud flagging. We celebrated in D.C. Champagne flowed. Flashbulbs sparked. But for me, the real victory came in a text message. Asterisk. "My mom got her land back today. Because of you. Thank you." One spring morning, I stood in front of a classroom at a law school. Guest lecture. The topic: property rights, ethics, and trust recovery. A student raised his hand. "Do you ever wish it never happened?" I paused. Thought of my home. My team. My people. My purpose. "No," I said. "I wish it didn't happen to asterisk so many people. But to me, no. Because everything they tried to take became everything I built." He nodded and scribbled something I'll never read into his notebook. Whitney's daughter was born that summer. She named her Elise Naomi. I held her in my arms, felt her tiny fingers curl around mine, and whispered, "You'll grow up in a world where no one gets to steal your story. Not if I had anything to do with it. Not if we kept fighting." On the 20th anniversary, we renamed the downtown courthouse. It was now the Naomi Hargrove Center for Justice and Restitution. I stood outside it, my name in stone, and ran my fingers across the letters. Once, someone removed my name from a deed. Now it was carved into the foundation of a city, of a movement, of a legacy. And I smiled. Because they didn't just fail to erase me. They helped make me unforgettable. 2 more great stories are next. Don't miss them. Subscribe and turn on notifications. Year 21 began without fanfare. No speeches. No flashbulbs. Just jasmine blooming along the blue gate between my yard and Whitney's. And a notice in the mail. Another false lien attempt on the Manchester office. Flagged and blocked by our internal systems before it could even be processed. It was a small moment, but a meaningful one. We were no longer reacting. We were preempting. The Reclaim Project had grown into something larger than any of us imagined, more than an organization now, a global advocacy infrastructure, legal hubs, emotional triage teams, cyber forensic investigators, trauma-informed mediators, even AI developers specializing in predictive fraud patterns. I was no longer the executive director. I had stepped back after year 20. "You deserve rest," Whitney had said, her daughter Elise, now a teenager, helping design our new logo. Rest, yes, but not retirement. I'd become something else. An advisor, a shadow in the wings. the person you call when the pattern doesn't make sense yet, but you know it's wrong. I didn't miss the spotlight. I missed beginnings. So I created one. We launched the Hargrove Catalyst program that fall, an incubator for local leaders starting anti-fraud networks in their communities. Our first cohort had 12 people. A librarian from Romania, a firefighter from Georgia, a housing counselor from South Africa, a nun from southern France. Every single one had a story. Every single one had scars. But more than that, they had blueprints. They weren't starting from scratch. They were starting from Sukhait. I visited Leona one last time. I didn't plan to, but one of our legal reps flagged that she had finally submitted her first letter of apology. Not a plea, not a PR stunt. Just a page. I read it 3 times. It didn't undo what she had done, but it was something. At the facility, she sat across from me, thinner now, her face lined with the years. I see your name everywhere, she said, and it never stops hurting. I let that hang. Do you want forgiveness? I asked. She nodded. Then earn it. How? Use what you know to help the people you once preyed on. She didn't answer. But I saw something shift behind her eyes. A door, maybe. Or a light. Time would tell. Whitney and I took a trip to a seaside cottage in Portugal. No phones, no schedules. Just sea air, good wine, and morning hikes. We stood on a cliff one evening watching the sun melt into the Atlantic. Do you ever think about what life would have been if none of it had happened? She asked. Sometimes, I said, but then I think about what life is now, and I wouldn't trade it. She bumped my shoulder. Even with the trauma? Especially with it. Because it hadn't just shaped us. It had Schofel-Sturer refined us. At year 25, the United Nations invited me to speak at a global summit on digital integrity and restorative systems. I stood in Geneva, a place where wars had been negotiated, and told the story of a woman who had her house stolen while she was pitching a tech startup. And how that woman built a system stronger than the one that tried to erase her. Justice, I told them, is not just courts and codes, it's community. It's continuity. It's the refusal to disappear. The hall rose to its feet. And as the applause washed over me, I closed my eyes and saw the porch light from that first night. The locked door. The woman in Darren's sweatshirt. The memory no longer crushed me. It crowned me. Because I had lived to reclaim it. By year 26, the Reclaim Project had touched 500,000 lives. Some were victims. Others were whistleblowers. Many were policymakers, therapists, coders, or financial advisors who had once sat on the sidelines until they read a headline, watched a video, or attended one of our summits and saw themselves reflected in the silence. That silence was now a signal, a call to action. We didn't just intervene. We prevented. In my quiet hours, I returned to writing. Not memos, not policy briefs, not speeches, stories. Fiction, mostly. But always threaded with truth. A girl who loses her inheritance and builds an empire from the ashes. A woman left at the altar who discovers her fiancé forged their prenup. A group of strangers who band together to protect their town from a faceless trust buying up every home. They weren't just stories. They were common mirrors. And readers saw themselves. And wrote to me, "This happened to me, thank you for making it visible." One day, Whitney called me over with something in her hands. A package. No name. Inside was a small, hand-carved wooden box. And inside that box, a single house key. With a note. To the one who reminded us how doors are meant to open. We never found out who sent it. But we mounted it in our new Toronto office, under glass. A symbol of return. Of reclamation. Mason was diagnosed with cancer in year 27. Aggressive. Sudden. He asked me not to cry in front of him. "I want jokes," he said. "No pity." So I brought him sci-fi comics and overpriced snacks. And every time he got too tired to talk, I read aloud from our earliest case files. "Remember this one?" I'd say. "The contractor who thought Leona was your assistant?" He'd grin. "We were all someone's assistant back then." He passed 5 months later. We named the digital forensics lab in his honor. His final message to me: "Keep fighting, Firewall, make it all count." I did. We did. Year 30, I returned to the house on Old Marina Lane. Not to reclaim it, to buy it. Leona had lost ownership long ago. It passed through 6 hands, sat abandoned. Then the bank offered it to the Reclaim Project for a symbolic fee. We turned it into a shelter. For women with nowhere to go. We named it Phoenix House. The porch light always stayed on. One night, after a long day training new advocates, I sat in that very living room, the same one where a photo of Leona and Darren once hung. Now it displayed a collage of stories, laminated case victories, thank you notes, children's drawings of safe homes. I ran my hand across the window frame. So much had changed, but the architecture remained, just like me, built differently now, but still standing. The world kept evolving. New scams, new tactics, new technologies. But we kept pace. Because what we had built wasn't just an organization. It was a Tarst language, one that said, "I see you. I believe you. You're not alone." And that language changed everything. A journalist once asked me, "What's the legacy you hope outlives you?" I thought about it. Then answered, that people who once whispered their stories now speak them with pride. That fraud is no longer a shameful secret, but a public wound we know how to treat. And that if you try to steal someone's life, you better be ready for the entire world to fight back. He blinked, then wrote the quote down word for word. Year 31. The final chapter. Not of the work, but of the story I had once sworn I'd never tell. The story of how I was erased, and how I rewrote myself back in. I was asked to give the keynote address at the Global Trust Recovery Summit in Oslo. They wanted a retrospective, a look back, a message forward. I stepped onto the stage, looked out at the sea of advocates and allies, and said, 3 decades ago, I was just a woman with a suitcase and a key that didn't work. I thought I'd lost everything. I hadn't. I'd only just found the beginning. I paused. And I told them everything. All of it. The way Darren had smiled as he disappeared. The way Leona had stared at me across a courtroom with hollow eyes. The night Whitney and I sat in a hospital room wondering how far the darkness would reach. And the morning the door opened again. Not just to my house, but to something bigger. A life reclaimed. A world restructured. A movement born in the ashes of betrayal. "You don't get to write me out," I said. "Not anymore. Not ever again." And the applause that followed wasn't for the version of me that had been hurt. It was for the one who had rebuilt. That winter, I published my memoir. Title, Toraged Unforged. It debuted in 18 languages. One critic called it a masterclass in transformation. Another said, it reads like a survival manual for the invisible wars. But the message I received that mattered most came from a teenager in Morocco. She wrote, "My father used to say, women have no power over property. I read your book to him out loud. Now he tells his friends I'm going to be a lawyer. I just wanted you to know, you changed something, here, with us." And I cried. Because that was the whole point. At age 60, I walked through my house and realized I didn't need anything more. No bigger offices. No louder platforms. No next battle. I had planted enough seeds. Others were growing them now. And I could rest. Not in surrender, but in victory. One last letter arrived. No sender listed. But the handwriting was unmistakable. Leona. I opened it slowly. Inside, Naomi, I was wrong. About everything. I'm still trying to become someone who deserves the air she breathes. But I think you were right. Not all debts are payable. Some are simply owned. And this one is mine. I don't expect redemption. But I hope you know, I no longer wish to erase you. I remember you now. Exactly as you are. And it humbles me. I folded the letter, placed it in my journal, and let the page fall closed. I sat on my porch that evening, just like I had so many years ago. The sky was lavender. Whitney's wind chimes played a lazy lullaby. Elise brought over tea. "Did you ever think it would turn out this way?" she asked. I smiled. "No, but I'm glad it did." She leaned against the railing, looked at the sun going down over the fence line. "You know what you are?" she said. "What?" "Proof." I looked at her. "Proof of what?" She grinned. "That you can take everything from a woman and still not take her. Asterisk. And with that, the story was done. Not finished. Just complete. Because the door that once locked me out was now forever open. And through it, I watched the next generation walk in. Stronger. Smarter. Ready. To reclaim everything. 2 more great stories are next. Don't miss them. Subscribe and turn on notifications.